What's going on, CDL fans, and welcome back to Champ Sunday with myself, Jake Maverick. Today, we're going to be talking about a bunch of different things. We're going to be talking about last week's matches of the weekend and some of the big things that happened, like LAT versus OpTic. We're going to talk about 5 players I think you might be sleeping on so far this season. We're also going to talk about potentially what the seeding will look like for Major 1. Then we're going to round out the video with the Ask Jake segment. I know this wasn't uploaded on Sunday. Obviously, my goal is to upload these on Sundays, but I've been watch partying the 8s and wagers every single night so far this week. And I just didn't have any time yesterday on Sunday to record this. So I'm sorry for it being a little bit late, but if you want to watch the 8s and wagers with me, I might be live right now when you're watching this, and I'll be live every night this week. At least that's the plan, to watch some COD and just chat with you guys about a whole bunch of different things. So hopefully I'll see some of you guys there in that watch party. But let's get it started, man. And let's talk first off about this past weekend's matches. I think it's the best place to start. And I think we got to start with the big one, right? With the one everyone probably wants to talk about, wants to hear me talk about. It's LAT versus OpTic Texas. This was a series, putting my fandom aside, a banger. Like this was one of the best series of the year. This was an absolute blast to watch. Obviously for me, it was a bit, heartbreaking. But I think for most fans, especially for OpTic fans, I'm sure this was a ton of fun to watch. Map number 1, Scrap drops the lowest damage in the CDL history in the hardpoint with 700 damage, like just under 800 damage. He went 6 and 19, and if LAT got 100-point clubbed on Hacienda, which is just absolutely insane. Map 2, though, he bounces back. He puts up like 1,700 damage in a 12-kill SND win. Scrap has been really good in SND so far this season, so that hardpoint, I mean, I don't know what happened in the HP. And then honestly, the control was pretty good, right? It's a couple offensive trolls, I think, from OpTic. The Skyline HP I thought was pretty good. It was pretty back and forth. At one point, LAT took like a 30-point lead towards the end, and then OpTic just iced up in a P2 into P3 rotation and won the game. And then obviously, the game 5, I mean, I really don't want to talk about it any more than I have to. I'm sure a lot of you watching this video probably watched my reaction on the watch party, whether it was live or going back and looking at the VOD, but 5-1 lead for the Thieves. And they just choke. I don't know what they were doing. They were playing too passive, I think, and too scared. Kind of letting Shotzi and Hook and just the team in general for OpTic do what they want. It was one of those maps that it might be the worst choke in recent memory that I can think of, right? I mean, we're potentially pushing full sail territory, right, with something that bad. It was insane. I don't know how the boys ended up choking that, especially considering it was Dylan Envoy's birthday, and he was the one who lost the 1v1 against Kenny at the very end of the game to lose the series. So unfortunately for my guy Dill, hopefully the rest of the birthday was all right, but I'm sure that match was a bit disheartening. On the terms of LAT, I don't know why they can't play hardpoint anymore. I don't know what happened with the HP. I will say they've only lost to OpTic and FAZE at this point in the season. So obviously losing some HPs to those teams isn't the end of the world, especially because they might be the 2 best HP teams in the game at this point. So obviously LAT has not been perfect this season, and people have been talking a whole load about like they should drop Envoy for Pred, or like they should make some sort of roster change, this and that. Like, we got to slow our roll. They've only lost twice, right, at the end of the day, so it's like really not that bad. And you also got to consider who they lost to. They're still 4-1 in the Major 1 qualifiers. They still have 2 matches that they should probably win, as we're going to talk about in a little bit, going into Major 1. We'll see how they play on LAN. Of course, they got to get at least like a top 3. I think that's easily the expectation. And then, yeah, the people who are saying drop Envoy, I just think it's crazy. You got to give the team some time to gel, right? You got to understand they've only been playing together for a few months, whereas you got OpTic, the core of them has been playing together for over a year. And then even before that, many of, Dashi and Shotzi played with Hook before. Then you obviously have FaZe, who has been playing together for multiple years at this point. I think the whole like drop Envoy or drop anyone on the top teams at this point, that whole conversation is just overdone. No one should be making a roster change unless you're literally one of the bottom teams in the game. So I think LAT are going to be all right. And then on the OpTic side of things, their SND is super hit or miss. The composure and the way to come back in that game 5 was insane, right? But obviously, you can't do that every time. If you go down 5-1 in SND, you are not coming back every single time. So they definitely got to figure some of their SND stuff out. But both of these teams, I think, showing that this should be a neck-and-neck rivalry. Neck and neck, no pun intended, right? Rivalry all year long. And I'm excited to watch these guys play more. Hopefully, we get to see them play each other on LAN. And yeah, I mean, LAT versus OpTic was a banger series, and it was absolutely heartbreaking. I can't believe they choked it, man. I can't believe they choked it. To touch on some other things that happened this past weekend, LAG obviously gets their first win. The Gentlemates org finally joining the league, gets their first victory. It was a 3-0 sweep over Cloud9. We're going to talk about right after this. I think LAG is one of those teams. Their record is better than they show. Looking at my second monitor right now, they are 1-5, but they have a 10-15 map count. So, they still won 10 maps. It's not all that bad. And I know people were talking about like, drop Priesta for Pred or drop Priesta for Illy or for Encourage. Priesta actually had a good weekend even though they went 1-1, he was their best player versus LAG, and he had actually a pretty solid series, even though they lost 3-1 to Toronto Ultra in their second series this weekend. So I think this is a team that, honestly, they just need some more time to see what happens, especially on LAN. Maybe there'll be a team that's good on LAN, right? Skies, Priesta, Kismet, these are all guys that have had success on LAN. So I think you got to give them a little bit more time before we say LAG need to make a change. But I do think if they perform not good on LAN at Major 1, if they go out top 12, you definitely should be looking at a change for that team. And then to talk about a team that might need a change, like I said, Cloud9 New York lost 2 series this weekend to Miami and LAG, both teams that I think all of us probably agree they should be beating. I don't even know how they're losing the way they are. They're currently 1-5 in the Major 1 qualifiers. They're 8-16 in map count. So, I mean, like I said, LAG's 10-15, Cloud9's 8-16. They both have 1 win, but one of them feels a little bit better than the other. C9, I don't know, bro. They just don't feel like they play together at all. Like, I feel like when you watch them play on the game, it feels like Mac and Kremp are like sort of sometimes together, sometimes not, but the ARs just always feel like they're split apart. It feels like Sib or Attach is really not there for trades for their SMG duo, which is not going to lead you to success. It just seems like everyone's sort of playing for themselves and like their own stats and their own kills, and none of them want to die. And obviously, Mac and Kremp are going to die a bunch because they're, relatively aggressive SMG players. But the ARs, to me, just don't feel like they're following up their subs well enough. To their credit, or at least to like Sib's credit, and even Attach, I think they both were individually a little bit better this past weekend. At least like their KDs weren't as bad, right? Their plus minus. They still did go 0-2, like I said, the teams they should be beating. But this is a team that's weird to me. I feel like they're another one. I think for all of these teams, they're all going to go to LAN and just see what happens. I don't think anyone's making a change before Major 1. And any of these teams that go out top 12, honestly, I think all of them that go out top 12, unless it's like somehow an LAT or a FaZe or an OpTic or an Ultra somehow bow out top 12 at the Major, I think everyone else would have to make a change other than those like 4 teams. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of what happens at the Major for a lot of these teams in terms of roster changes. And we're going to talk about Major 1 seeding and what I think is going to happen after this coming weekend, because it's the last weekend of qualifiers. So to talk about the seeding for Major 1, I went through every team's remaining matches. Some teams only play 1, some teams play 2 matches this coming weekend. And obviously some teams have some difficult schedules and other ones have something easier. So talking about potentially what the seeding could look like, I think it gets really, really interesting, because I think we could see potentially 4 teams end with a 6-1 record, right? OpTic versus Toronto is going to be one of the biggest ones, because they're the only match that each other play. They play each other. The winner of that is going to get the 1 seed. If Toronto wins, they go 7-0 on the stage. They're the 1 seed no matter what. No one else can go undefeated. They're the only ones currently undefeated. If OpTic wins, though, which personally I think is what I'd predict at this point, because I just think OpTic's, their control for sure has been better, and I think that mode could really influence the series. For OpTic, if they win, both teams go 6-1, but then OpTic wins the tiebreaker because it would go to, direct, playing each other, and OpTic would have that victory over them. So then OpTic would get the 1 seed. But I also think Carolina and LAT both have matches they should be winning, so they should both go 6-1. And then that's where it kind of gets interesting, because I also think there's a bunch of teams that'll go 2-5. I think Vancouver, LAG, Miami will all go 2-5. So tiebreakers in there. But just to give you my predicted seeding for this, right? This could end up being wrong. It'll probably end up being wrong. I'm sure there'll be some more upsets and things we don't expect. But for me, I got OpTic 1 seed, Ultra 2 seed. I'm looking down, by the way, because I wrote this down. Carolina 3 seed, LAT 4, FaZe 5, Boston 6, Rocker 7, Surge 8, LAG 9, Heretics 10, C9 11, and Falcons 12. So the way that would work out is we would see OpTic versus Surge in round 1 at the Major, Toronto versus Rocker, which I feel like we've seen already like twice this year, Carolina versus Boston, and LAT versus FaZe round 1. For me, I don't exactly want to have to play FaZe round 1 at the Major, but it feels like the most likely or the most probable outcome here for LAT, unless they lose matches, I guess. I mean, if they go 5-2, I feel like they're definitely going to end up playing FaZe, because FaZe is going to end up 4-3. I think they're going to win both their matches this weekend. So unless LAT lose both and go 4-3, then maybe there's a difference there. Maybe they don't play FaZe, who knows? But LAT FaZe is very, very possible. I saw Doug Lieb on Twitter, shout out to him, posted there's like over 10 million different combinations of what can happen this weekend across the matches that would influence seeding. So clearly I did not run all the numbers, right? 10 million is a lot. I just went with my gut and my best guess here. So I think round one could be interesting here, but we could definitely see LAT FaZe, which would be a banger on land, right? Like at the end of the day, that would be super entertaining. But boy, oh boy, would I rather my guys play literally just about anyone else other than some of those top teams in round one, just to get that first win probably under your belt. But that's a potential major seeding, which I think could be pretty crazy. All right, but now let's talk about really the main event of this video, which is 5 CDL players that I think you might be sleeping on or who deserve more hype. I'm not actually sure which title I'm going to go with for this video. I have a bunch of ideas written down on the Notion page I'm looking at, but these are players you're sleeping on who I think maybe need more hype. Honestly, it's hard to pick players that, you know, fans who are pretty locked in are sleeping on, right? Like if you're watching this video, you probably watch a good bit of COD. So you probably know who's playing good and who's playing bad for the most part. There are only 48 players in the league. This ain't no league with hundreds of players where like I could try to pick out a couple guys that maybe someone forgets about. So I'm guessing a lot of you are going to potentially think of these players when you think of 5 guys off the top of your head that maybe are being a bit underrated this season. But hopefully I can surprise you with at least one of these. So let's get it started. And this is in no order. I just listed 5. The first one on my list here is Rencor. I actually think Rencor, despite Miami's struggles, has been really good. I got some stats for these players. He's number 17 in overall KD, number 14 in HP KD, and number 17 in control KD. And even in the games Miami loses, which is more often than not, right? Because they are 2-5 or something like that, or 2-4 on the season. They definitely have a losing record. He tends to be their best player or their second best player behind Real in most of these series. And he often is leading his team in kills, plus minus, damage across these series. And especially versus top teams like Boston, Ultra, FaZe. He led his team in some of these categories, these slaying categories, which is pretty crazy. One, because like those are obviously good teams, but also he is a rookie, right? Like he's a rookie at the end of the day. So to put up these numbers and to be pretty consistent across the board versus some of the good teams in the league is pretty insane. I also think people always talk about his comms. Like a lot of pro players will say he's got really good comms. He's like another one of those human UAVs, as you know, some pros are dubbed in the league. So to me, it feels like Rencor is one of those guys. Probably also because he's on Miami and they've been struggling, that kind of gets slept on a little bit. So definitely want to show him some love. Then we go to the second player on my list. And this guy, maybe not as slept on, but I got Estriel. He's 20th in overall KD, 26th in HP, 14th in SND, and 14th in control. He's actually only gone negative 1 time since the first week versus LA Thieves. So that's pretty insane considering I feel like, you know, someone like Nero might take the spotlight a bit more because Nero's a bit more of the aggressive sub who's going to pop like 3 pieces or have a big 40 bomb type hard point or something like that. But Estriel's honestly been super consistent. He makes a lot of plays throughout the map. He, you know, follows up and works very well with his sub duo in Nero in pretty much every game mode. And both times they've played FaZe, he's been their best player. I've been saying this if you watch my watch party, take the Estriel over if you do any betting versus FaZe, because for some reason, even last year, like it just felt like he always did good against FaZe. I don't know what it is about that matchup for him, but it feels like he always plays well against those guys. Even if he loses, right, at least him individually plays pretty well. So Estriel's another one who I think has had a bit of an underrated season. Then we go to number 3, a guy who maybe isn't as slept on anymore, but I think after last year, he was definitely pretty slept on for the most part. And I got Snoopy. He's number 8 in overall KD, number 8 in hardpoint, number 16 in search, and number 25 in control. He's been he's been amazing. He's been amazing, for lack of a better word, in hardpoint and SND this season. He hasn't had below a 90 Slayer rating other than 1 time this season in any series, which is just insane consistency. To be able to get kills consistently across a series like that is just awesome. And he also just plays really well with Purge. Purge is another guy that could be on this list, but I think after this past weekend with the 45-20 map he put on a Vault Hardpoint map 4 versus Ravens, I think people have been gassing him up a lot. So Purge is definitely an honorable mention for this list, but I think him and Snoopy together as a sub duo, they've been getting the best out of each other. Purge can be a bit more of the playmaker, I feel like, especially in search. He's got a lot of first bloods, whereas Snoopy doesn't have nearly as many. He's a bit more of the follow-up type of guy, whereas Purge is more of the entry. I think the sub duo is working really good. I think Snoopy has been exceptional in many different ways this season. And for Boston being kind of a dark horse, I feel like, as we head into Major 1, Snoopy's definitely a guy I had to put on the list. Then we go to the fourth player on my list, and I do have Beans from the Toronto Ultra. He's number 10 in overall KD, number 17 in hardpoint, and number 4 in search and destroy. I really think he might be getting slept on. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people, like I said, who watch the CDL know he's really good, but I think he's being slept on because Kleenex and Joe DeCeves, I feel like, have really taken the spotlight, especially Toby. Kleenex has been amazing, but even Joe DeCeves has had something crazy matches. I think he might be number 1 in SNDKD for Joe DeCeves, so he's another honorable mention for this list who could definitely be on here. Beans has only gone negative in one series all year, which, funnily enough, was against the Vegas Falcons in a series they won, so it didn't even like negatively impact the team. Obviously, him going negative that one time. And he's also been insanely consistent with his slaying across series. I think something people talked about a lot in the offseason was, Beans replacing Scrap on this team and filling in that role. I was someone, if you watched any of my content, really thought Beans would be able to fill the Scrap shoes. Maybe not as good as someone like Scrap, right? Because I think he's one of those generational type slayers. But I thought he'd be able to fill the shoes really well, and he definitely has been. His Slayer ratings across all of his series, right? And I rounded these up by like 0.5 just for the sake of making this simple, or down, if depending on, which way it went. He is an 84, 88, 86, 89, 92, 90, 88. So pretty much has had an 84 or higher in every single series and has been right around a 90 in most of them, which is just really good slaying, like really consistent. He hasn't had one series where it feels like he sort of fell off or maybe just had a bad one. Like I said, he's only went -1. So I think Beans is someone who definitely has been playing really well and it might have just been overshadowed by his sub duo. And then we get to number 5 on this list. And also, I'm sure there's many players you could probably throw on here. Casual fans who maybe don't watch every single match, who only watch their favorite team. There's tons of players who have been really good this year, surprisingly. So definitely like tune into some other games if you are someone who just watches like maybe 1 or 2 series a weekend. There's definitely some other teams and games you should definitely check out. But number 5 for me is going to be Kremp from Cloud9. Statistically speaking, number 24 in overall KD, number 22 in hardpoint, number 20 in SND. Doesn't sound crazy, but he's been above average, honestly, in most categories in most ways compared to a lot of the other players in the league. And I just really think he's being held back by his ARs. Like, I think he's been pretty solid this season. He's been one of the best at getting first bloods in search and destroy, which obviously is like one of the most important things. Like in SND, getting first bloods is like kind of one of the key stats. He's been one of the best at that. He's also been pretty consistent in terms of just like how he's played across the year. And then also compared to last year, I think he's been better. Last year, people kind of talked about Kremp as like someone who was a bit underwhelming on LAT, who could potentially be dropped, who wasn't consistent. And I think this year, honestly, he's been pretty good at sort of shutting those people up who didn't necessarily believe in him on this team. And I also think he's really being overshadowed by the talks of Pred to Cloud9, right? Because obviously Pred's a free agent. He says he wants to come back after Major 1. And as many of us know, if you've been watching for more than just last season, Pred has played with Mac and Sib, and then obviously Accuracy is their coach, and he played with them as well. They were a team of 4 on the Seattle Surge a few years ago. So Pred to C9 makes sense in terms of the whole friendship cheese we talk about in the CDL, obviously. So I think Kremp seems like the odd man out, right? Also because Attach is on this team, who is just one of those vets that everyone likes, so you don't really feel like he's someone who should be dropped. So I think all that conversation about dropping Kremp for Pred also is one of the reasons he might be underrated this year, because I think him and Mac have been good, and I think their ARs just have not been good. Like I talked about earlier, I just don't think the ARs are really helping them that often on the map. And I just think Kremp has been a bit underrated. People might be sleeping on him so far this season. But now that we've talked about all of that, it's time to end the show with our Ask Jake segment. I got 3 questions from the last video. So if you have any questions for me to talk about next week, drop them in the comments. I'll be filming it after the last week of qualifiers. So if you have questions specifically maybe about the major, that would be a good time, or this video would be a good place to comment those. So let's get it started, man, to talk about these questions. And thank you guys for all the questions. There were actually a bunch, so I only picked 3 of them, but there were a bunch on the last video. So first one here from my guy, Sparta Gamer. He asked, if you had to pick, what are 3 orgs you would like to see join the CDL? And I feel like this is perfectly timed because he asked this question before the news of Hastro reacquiring Envy and the Dallas Empire brand, broke on the timeline. So Envy is definitely one of those teams. Envy or Empire, right? Whatever they come back as. I want to see Envy back in COD for sure. They are one of the OGs. I mean, OG fans know Envy OpTic is like the El Clasico. Nowadays, it's OpTic FAZE, but Envy versus OpTic was always like the matchup every single year, every time they faced off. Another org that's historic in COD, I think I'd want to see him come back, would be Complexity. Cole, obviously the Cole Dynasty was a thing way back in the day in Ghosts. Complexity is an org for sure I'd love to see come back. And then they've also expressed interest in coming back. And then another team that I think has expressed interest in coming into the league that is one of the biggest orgs in the world, has a massive global fan base, is Team Liquid. Liquid is big in a lot of other games. They got a ton of fans. They're one of the biggest, as I said. So I would love to see them come into COD. I feel like they would really give the scene a boost in viewership and could probably field pretty good rosters, or at least have the money to field good rosters. So Envy, Complexity, Team Liquid are the three I would pick. And then my second question here is from Skylar, and it actually kind of bounces off the first question. Well, he asked, what is one team color combo you'd love to see in the CDL? So I think one, bouncing off of the whole Envy Empire thing, I think getting a golden black type of colorway back in the league would be great. Now, since subliners are out, we don't even have like a yellow in the league anymore. So a gold black or a yellow and black, once again, I think would be dope. But then another one would just be like the classic, like Miami Vice City neon pink with like black and blue. I think that would be fire. There's no pink teams in the league, right? We got red, we got green, we got blue, we got purple. Miami's orange. They're the only orange ones. So I think a pink colorway team would be fire. I wish Miami did that, but they went more like the Dolphins route and not like the Miami Heat alternate colorway with like the pink, right? So I think those would be some fire colorways to add into the league. And then our last question here comes from Denver Schneider, who asked, which team do you think will be the first to make a change this season? And this one is obviously, I mean, there's so many options, I feel like, right? I think there's a handful of teams. You could look at Cloud9, you could look at Surge, you could look at LAG, who am I forgetting? Falcons, I guess, right? Obviously Miami, Ravens or Boston or Rocker, if they underperform on land. I think those are all teams that could potentially make a change at some point first. If I had to pick one team, though, thinking about how they've looked in their matches, how they've performed, and then kind of like the names on the team, right? Because I think at the end of the day, a team like Cloud9 might be the obvious answer, but like Sib's been their worst player, and I don't see him being dropped, and I also don't see like Attach being dropped. So looking at the names on the team, I actually think I'd go with the Vancouver Surge as the first team to make a change, right? I think Abuza's probably safe no matter what, but I think Nasty's a guy who's been dropped multiple times in the past. Pixie's a guy who's been dropped in the past. 04 is newer into the scene. Maybe he's kind of safe with Abuza as kind of like a duo to build around. But honestly, I don't think he's untouchable either. I feel like the Surge kind of have been underwhelming, right? They haven't looked that dominant even in the maps or the matches and the maps they've won. And then they've also just been, I feel like people knew their team composition wasn't going to work. Like many people, including myself, kind of criticized their slaying abilities that we thought they were going to have on this team. So I could really see the Vancouver Surge making a change because it's going to be tough for them. I mean, I did have them making winners bracket right at the 8th seed when I talked about this earlier in the video. So maybe they can get a win or something to save themselves. But if they do go out like top 12, I could for sure see them making a change. But yeah, that's going to do it for this episode of Champs Sunday. If you did enjoy, make sure to drop a like, sub to the channel. We're on the road to 10K subscribers. I don't know when we're going to hit that, right? Maybe we'll hit that. Who knows? Maybe we'll hit it in a month. Maybe we'll hit it by the end of the year. I guess we're going to really road with 10K is that next milestone. I appreciate all the love and support I've been getting on the watch parties recently, as well as on all my videos. So thank you guys for real, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.